Constraining different items together inside of our scene gives us a tremendous degree of power when rigging all of our elements together. Now, as you can see, I'm in the setup layout, and I've opened up a little project file called Working with Constraints, and I've supplied this file to you. So I encourage you to follow along, look at all this stuff, and follow along with the examples. The best way to learn and understand all this content is to get your hands dirty. Now, before we really jump in, I think it's really important to point out that when we're working with constraints, you can actually find two sets of constraints inside of the Modo rigging tools. I'm in the modifiers tab, and I apologize that my screen is getting a little chopped off here, but I'm in the modifiers section, and you can see that I have a whole series of constraints down here. Now, I don't want you to be confused with the dynamic constraints, and so I'm in the Dynamics tab. These constraints are very, very different from one another, so please note that we are working with constraint modifiers, all of these guys in the Modifiers tab, and for the rest of this week's content, we're going to be hanging out in this area. Okay, let's jump in and start working with all of our constraints. Now, for this first example, we're going to focus our attention on the position constraint, and I don't need this little arrow, so I'm just going to deactivate its visibility. And then you have the blue ring and the green ring, intelligently named the big target and the little target. Now, before we get started, it's really important, as with everything when it comes to rigging an animation, that we have a very solid understanding of the location of all of the center points for the items that we're going to be working within. Now, the cool thing about working in the setup layout is that the center points are already visible, or they should be visible, and I like that. We can very quickly start clicking on all of them and get a good understanding of where the current location of the center point is. Now, each one of these items has been generated at the origin of the scene, so it should come to no surprise that the default location for all of our all of our center points are exactly where they should be, at the origin. So life is good. So they're both right on top of each other. Well, to make it a little bit different from each other, let's move these things apart from each other. I'm going to grab the little green target, pull it out away from the origin. And now you can see the location of the center points for each one of these rings. Now, the cool thing about working with constraints is that the center points are now going to have a direct relationship with each other. As we've described in other videos and in other classes, the center point really is the most important facet of the animation system. It really is where all of the movement stems from. It is the source location for our animations. And here in the rigging component of this of our pipeline, it's even more important, especially when working with modifiers, constraint modifiers, that is. Okay, so let's go ahead and create our first constraint modifier. I want to be able to create a simple rig that allows me to move this blue circle, and then at any given time, I want this green circle to follow along for the ride. Now, on the surface, you're probably saying, well, why don't you just, make a parent-child relationship? And I could, but check it out. I want the location of this green circle to adopt the exact same location as this blue circle way over here. I don't want to guess. I don't want to be close. I don't want to fudge it. I want to be precise. I want precision in all of this. Thus enter the role of the position constraint. And let's go ahead and create one. Now, the selection order here is absolutely critical, and this is often the part that people screw up in. The first item that we select is going to be the child item inside of the relationship that we're about to make. Now remember, I want the green guy to share the exact same location inside of our three-dimensional scene as the blue one. So in every sense, the blue circle is going to be the parent child. It's going to be the driver of this entire relationship. So in order to get the green guy to go where the blue guy is, I need to ensure that I select the green one first. As always, when working with our rigging tools, we're going to be working at the item level. So just triple check, make sure you're working at item level here. And select the green one, hold down the shift key, select the blue one, and we're ready to go. In order for us to create and apply a constraint inside of our scene, we must have at least two items selected inside of our three-dimensional universe. Now, I've got them both selected here. You can see that they're selected over in the item list. Things are ready to rock and roll, and let's get cooking here. With these two items selected, I can return to the modifiers tab and choose the position constraint. It's this first one. You'll notice that when nothing's selected, all of these position constraints are all grayed out. You even get a little error message saying, hey, you got to have a couple things selected. So that's a nice visual piece of confirmation here that we have everything selected when all the buttons are illuminated. Let's go ahead and add the position constraint. Just click on it. Boom. Mission accomplished. You can see immediately that the green guy immediately jumped back in location to adopt the location of the blue one. Further, if I move the blue one, every time I move it, check it out, it's going to move the green one. Now, the only channels that we're constraining here are the transformation position channels. So I'm only affecting the XYZ position values of the green circle here itself. If I rotate the blue guy, see how the green one doesn't rotate? However, if I was to move it up and down, the green guy goes along for the ride, which is pretty cool. In addition, if I was to select my little target, the green guy, of course I can, more than happy to go in here and rotate this. But watch what happens when I try to move it. The tool handles will move, but the object won't, or the item won't move. Further kind of illustrating that a constraint is overriding the transformation position values for my green circle. Pretty cool. Now, underneath the surface here, let's look at exactly what's going on, because we can see the visual representation of this constraint here inside the OpenGL viewport. But if we analyze the contents of our item list way over here on the right, you can see that we have a couple new things in play here. Let's start at the top of our item list and work our way down. Now, right underneath the name, or right to the left of the name of our project, we have a new little plus sign. If we click on it, it's going to show us all of the constraints that are currently influencing our scene. We only have one at the moment, so that's the one that's showing up, and it's called position constraint : big target. And if we look down here on the little target, there's another little plus sign, and we have a duplicate of this thing on the little target itself. So that thing and that guy are literally the exact same thing being displayed in two different areas. At times, especially when working in very complex scenes where there are hundreds of items at play, being able to very quickly get a list of all of the active constraints at the root scene level is pretty invaluable. It makes it very efficient and very quick for us to find the constraints that we want to work with. Let's go into our little target, pop open, and select our constraint here. And you can see that each constraint is going to get a whole series of offset modifiers that will allow us to continue to edit the values that the constraint is being applied, that the constraint is applying to its source object. In our case, the little green target. Now, if I was to go in and let's just push this forward along the Z, you can see that I can offset this at a defined location. There we go. Ta-da! Wonderful. So if I was to bring that back, awesome. And now, if I was to move it, the green guy would go along for the ride. So we still have a level of control over the position of our child constraint object on the actual constraint itself. Now, getting rid of constraints is relatively easy as well. So if you want to go in and remove the connection between the little target and the big target, it's as easy as going back over into the item list, right-clicking on the object, and of course, hitting the delete key. And now the connection's gone, and we're back to what we had earlier. Now, the transformation values that are associated with, or the transformation values that are in that item's current transformation channels are going to determine all of its location information. So if I was to return these to 0, put that rotation value back down to 0, we can quickly get my objects back to their root location, which is at the origin of the scene. Same with this guy. Let's just put these to 0. There we go, and now we're back to where we are. In addition, if you were to analyze the contents of our item list, you can see that both the plus sign at the root level of our scene project file and the plus sign next to little target have been removed, also continuing to validate that constraint that it is no longer affecting our scene. It has been removed. The cool thing about working with a position constraint is that we can very quickly glue together all of the center points to the to the master object inside the hierarchy. It's a little bit more, you have a little bit more control than a parent-child relationship, and in a lot of use cases, this is going to give us the result that we're after. The position constraint is one of the easiest constraints to work with, and one that I know is going to make a difference on the rigs that you create.